tonight's big story breakdown, we're keeping up with the Capitol. Legislation to approve nutrition services for Oklahoma Medicaid members is now awaiting the governor's signature.
Senator Adam Pugh says he's been working on the Food is Medicine bill for 6 years. He teamed up with the organization Fresh RX on Senate Bill 806. It's designed to allow managed care groups to offer food as a pharmaceutical benefit. Senator Pugh says he believes high-quality food has more value than a prescription medicine and hopes this will help incentivize healthy eating.
I'll give you an example is if you're diagnosed with high blood pressure or high cholesterol, you can take medicine, and I would argue that you will be on that medicine for the rest of your life. So not only is it a cost to the taxpayer who's paying, for that person to have Medicaid insurance, you're not changing any sort of lifestyle or behavior for that individual to get healthy. And so this kind of moves all the way up that chain of events. And obviously, if they decide as the patient to take that pharmaceutical prescription, then they can do that. But the goal is really to change people's health outcomes.
Senator Pugh says the bill received bipartisan support in both chambers. He expects the governor to sign it into law.
Republican leaders now providing clarity about why they decided not to take action on the proposed social studies standards.
Fox 25's Paige Taylor has more from the state capitol and what we're learning tonight.
Democrats say the legislature has failed to hold State Superintendent Ryan Walters accountable, but Republican leadership says there was not an overwhelming consensus within the Republican caucus to take action. Senate Pro Tem Lonnie Paxton says after the governor expressed concern over the process of the proposed social studies standards being voted on by State Board of Education members, Paxton and State Senator Adam Pugh worked together to draft Senate Joint Resolution 20, a resolution to disapprove the standards that nearly a dozen Republican House representatives initially signed onto. Paxton says the governor was pushing for it all the way up until last Sunday, when he told Paxton the legislature could do with it what they wanted to. The Senate Republican caucus met on Monday and discussed the issue. Superintendent Walters also attended the meeting.
Many of us had already talked to state school board members, and so we had a very robust discussion, and after that was all over, we just realized there was not enough support within our caucus to move that forward.
SJR 20 outlined the standards will cost $33 million to implement.
We traditionally, in the activities budget for the State Department of Education, line item textbook funds that go towards this purpose, and so it's in the base of the budget. We did it in FY25, FY24, FY23, and so as long as the State Department of Education was held flat with the flex benefit increase, then it would be funded in their base level budget.
Democrats have previously outlined some of their issues with the content of the curriculum, like identifying discrepancies in the 2020 election and identifying the source of the COVID-19 pandemic as from a Chinese lab. House and Senate minority leaders expressing concern over who will supply the textbooks with this curriculum.
From my understanding, PragerU and Heritage Foundation are the only two entities or potential vendors, I guess you could say, that would be able to match curriculum to fit these standards.
We're very concerned that some of the people on the executive committee that Superintendent Ryan Walters named are textbook related. And so we're going to make sure that that is analyzed with any of these calls for proposals, requests for, however it works at OMES.
These standards will go into effect this upcoming school year and will be in effect for the next 6 years. Reporting at the state capitol, Paige Taylor, Fox 25 News.
We're also keeping a close eye on some other education measures making their way through the state capitol. Senate Bill 235 would establish the Grow Your Own Educator program. It's now heading to the Senate for further consideration. Senate Bill 794 now headed to the governor's desk for his approval. It establishes new student teaching requirements in Oklahoma. And Senate Bill 245 would make changes to the teacher empowerment program to allow more teachers at low-income schools to join. This measure now heads to the Senate for consideration. Well, the Oklahoma Senate advances a bill that would make it unlawful to hold adult performances in public places if it would expose a minor to obscene material. Democrats argue this bill targets drag performances and questioned why this bill is necessary. Republican lawmakers say it's about protecting children.
Let's be clear from the outset that HB 1217 is an anti-speech, anti-queer, anti-art bill masquerading as a protection against obscenity.
Why in the world do you want obscene material, sexual material in front of minors? Ask yourself that question. Why do you want to protect obscene materials in front of minors?
The bill passed in the Senate in a 39-8 vote. It now heads back to the House for more consideration.
The Oklahoma House passed a bill which would allow those convicted of certain sexual crimes against children to be eligible for the death penalty. Representative Tim Turner secured passage in the House for Senate Bill 599, would also allow the minimum imprisonment of 10 years or life without parole as potential punishments. The bill passed an 80-8 vote, now moves back to the Senate for consideration of amendments made in the House. A bill aiming to increase sentencing requirements for shooting into a home or business is moving forward. The measure would add the crime to the list of offenses requiring those convicted to serve at least 85% of their sentence before they can be eligible for parole. According to the Senate Pro Tem, the legislation carefully tailored to ensure that only the criminal element will be prosecuted. If the shooting is accidental or unintentional, it will be at the discretion of a district attorney as to whether or not the shooting was willful or intentional. Several senators had questions about the 85% requirement.
You're recognized for a follow-up.
Are you concerned that we are putting an 85% on just property damage if no one actually lives in that building?
I'm absolutely not concerned with that at all, and I'll tell you why. Right now, drive-by shootings are an 85% crime, but if you stop your car and get out and shoot, it's not an 85% crime. And I'll tell you, a lot of times they have no idea who's in that house, nor do they care. And I worked lots of cases where juveniles were shot just because somebody randomly sprayed a house, so I have zero concerns about that.
The legislation also extends the 85% requirement to people who attempt, conspire, or solicit others to commit any of the violent crimes already classified under Oklahoma's 85% sentencing law. The House passed a bill with a 71-17 vote and now heads to the governor's desk.
Lawmakers are looking to make changes to the Sarah Stitt Act, requiring the Department of Corrections to help inmates obtain a real ID driver's license before they're released. Service Oklahoma would have to coordinate with ODOC on the effort instead of the Department of Public Safety. Senator Julie Daniels was asked today why it's important for inmates to get these IDs before they're released.
Thank you for the question. I'm sure the senator appreciates, as do I, that there are many small steps we can take in helping people get second chances and help them on their road to being productive citizens once they have fulfilled their responsibility to the taxpayer by serving their sentence. So we're just improving on something that we wisely have already done to make sure that before they're discharged or within 6-9 months of release that we make sure DOC supplies them with as many of the items as they might need to help go out, get a job, get accommodation, those sorts of things.
The Senate approved the measure, but because amendments were made, the bill is now headed back to the House for consideration. A measure aimed at improving law enforcement coordination ahead of the 2028 Summer Olympic Games has unanimously passed in the House. Representative Robert Manger carried Senate Bill 523, which allows sheriffs, deputy sheriffs, and reserve sheriffs to exercise the same powers and duties in counties outside their home jurisdiction when officially assigned. This bill now heads to the governor's desk for his signature.
Lawmakers making more progress on protecting Oklahoma's bioscience and research assets. Representative Colin Duell introduced Senate Bill 552, says this measure will protect these assets from being exploited by hostile foreign governments and will help strengthen our national security. The measure now moves to the governor for his consideration. Governor Kevin Stitt already signed several bills into law, including Senate Bill 460, which will modify our natural gas energy standard by declaring gas as the preferred choice of generation for new generating facilities in the state. This bill will become effective on July 1st. He also signed Senate Bill 595, which will create the Oklahoma Jail Standards Act emergency.